besties and bosses. Oh my gosh, my voice almost didn't work. How you all doing? Happy Wednesday. I'm still getting used to saying Wednesday. I'm so happy to be here with y'all. It is so blue. I'm in New York City and I was just in Florida this past week visiting some really close girlfriends of mine for a quick girls' weekend and trip. And it is wild to me. I feel like I brought the Florida weather with me. It's not that warm, but it is so blue outside. So I feel like we actually have proper light for once for our lives. I always laugh when I look back and I see the replays when we pin them to the top of the Facebook group. It almost looks like my hair color changes every other week depending on the light. It's like blonde. Sometimes it looks more brown. Anyway, that is that is what's going on over here. I'm very happy because it's very sunny. I sat in front of my little happy light today, so I've got like all the sun energy today. That's not what we're talking about today. Today, what are we talking about? We're talking about the edge that helped me grow from $800 per month, yes, $800 per month, to fully booked, making consistent 25K to 40K months. It's more around 30 to 40K months, but I like to be as transparent and honest as possible. But like last month, what was it? It was like a 32K month. So that's usually about where we're at now. And I share that because I want you to see that what's possible with one-on-one business, but also just what we're talking about here. Obviously, I always need to give these disclaimers. Obviously, there's more than one thing that has taken me from $800 per month to 25K to 40K cash months in my business, and that will allow me to continue to grow and scale. Of course. We talk about all of those nuances here, and I really believe in clarity, mindset, strategy, and action, and time as well, and feedback there in terms of what creates those results. But there are some really specific mindset components that I have seen make such a big shift for me, and that I see through my clients as well. And what we're talking about today, this is a conversation I have with almost every single one of my clients, and this is something I see when you're not aware of can really limit your success. I see this as such a big limitation and something that can really unlock a lot for you when you understand it and shift through it. And it's just not one of those sexy things, which is why I think we don't talk about it a lot. But I've just been having this conversation with clients a lot, and I've been reflecting a bit on my business and just really seeing how much doing the work around this at every level has supported me exponentially. And my husband and I were talking about this. I think this really supports him as an actor, for example. This is something that supported me when I was acting. And I think it's just something that sometimes when we hear a mindset, I just did a podcast interview on my friend Kara's podcast, which I will link to. We were talking more about mindset and the way I think about mindset. And I think sometimes when we hear mindset, we just think mindset work is like just be positive all of the time. And obviously there is a time and a place for positivity. I'm all for positivity, but you all know I'm more for neutrality than positivity in many ways. But I think sometimes mindset work almost gets like watered down or misconstrued in our online space. And I really see it as more of, we all have a mindset, whether we believe in it or not, right? You have a mindset, you have thoughts, you have beliefs, you have fears, right? You have a human brain, you have a mindset, but also just our ability to manage our thoughts, to manage our minds, to see that we are not our thoughts. And our ability to do that quite literally uses a part of our brain called the executive functioning center, which is what I think of as the CEO center of your brain. And this is a skill set as business owners. But when we're not aware of our thoughts, that is when our thoughts become the boss of us, and that is when we just start to think our thoughts are truth and that this is the way things always are. And I think that's when we get really stuck in business. So going off on a little tangent here, but hopefully that all makes sense. Brooke, love your sweater. Oh, thank you so much. The sleeves are fun, aren't they? Sorry, Brooke. A couple weeks ago, I had like an ear thing. I just banged my hand on the windowsill when I did that. Thank you, Brooke. And I'm like too hopped up on, this is all natural. This is sunshine energy, but I'm just apparently a little high on life today. Thank you for the compliment. I think this one is actually rented. I use Rent the Runway for live streams because then I can have extra fun things to wear. Okay, I've been teasing this out for like 3 minutes. Let's talk about what this is. I've been teasing it out because I feel like if I don't tease this out, I'm going to say what this is, and y'all are going to want to hop off now or on the replay because you're like, ugh, really, Kim? Like, tell me the like manifesting trick to making $1 million. I don't want to have this conversation, but this is the work, y'all. This is the work. This is the stuff that will make you $1 million in your business. And that is learning how to tolerate and stretch your capacity to sit in the discomfort of disappointment, and to really understand how to have a relationship with disappointment and how to reframe disappointment and how to not allow disappointment to run your business, to limit you, to have you change what you're showing up for. And I'm going to unpack all of this, and I'm going to talk about how disappointment is one of the Biggest ways I see people get in their own way, sabotage their success, but also the so-called fix, but how we can shift this around. But really and truly what I see is how often as business owners we are so scared of being disappointment, we are so wanting to avoid being disappointed, or if we get disappointed, let's say you have big launch goals, right, and you want to have a 100K launch and you don't reach those goals, how when that disappointment sets in, how that disappointment then becomes the ruler of your business that dictates everything, right, and it tells you you suck, or your strategy doesn't work, or you shouldn't try this again, and how that becomes such like that disappointment itself becomes what dictates what you do or don't do next, as opposed to when we can learn how to befriend disappointment and how to navigate it and how to sit in it, how to even reframe it and see like what is the opportunity within that. That is such, there's no secret to success, but that is what I see below people's businesses up. When I look at me making $800 a month and I look at me today, of course, again, nuance. There are other things in place. There's other mindset work I've had to do. There is, of course, a strategy that I've executed on every single day for 8 years in my business. So we're not discounting that. But when I look at, my strategy hasn't changed that much, right? The refinement of it has. But even the ability to be able to refine my strategy and to be able to show up the way I do, to be able to make the money I do, to hold the number of clients I do, what I really see is when I look back at early Kim in business, I had zero tolerance for disappointment, right? If I got disappointed by something, I just made the story that meant I sucked, my business wasn't going to work, something wasn't working. As soon as I got disappointed, like a strategy didn't work, I hopped to another strategy, right? That was such a limiting hurdle for me. Or the other thing I really did when I was making about $800, maybe $1,000, $2,000 per month, I was so unavailable to be disappointed. I was so in my perfectionism still at that point that I wouldn't even set goals that were big enough to stretch me because I didn't want to not be able to reach them, right? I was so unavailable to not be perfect, right? To not reach those goals. I did not want to sit in that disappointment because I couldn't handle what I would make that mean about me, how I would take that on. I literally would crumble with that or want to, that's a little dramatic. I wouldn't crumble. We're still here 8 years later. But I just made it mean so much about me and my abilities as a coach, as a business owner, as my potential for success. And I made it mean a lot that instead of really allowing myself to stretch and sit in that disappointment and really allowing myself to even run at disappointment, because what I've now seen to be true is when I see, oh my gosh, disappointment is just a feeling and it's short-lived and it's not that big of a deal, and there's usually a lot of opportunity if I look for it within disappointment, which I'll break down for you. If I'm willing to set a goal that's big enough where I might get disappointed, if I'm willing to run at something that might disappoint me, right, within that I am stretching myself. When I am able to stretch my capacity to sit in the disappointment of my clients and their results, right, I'm able to hold more space for them. All that happens is I then also stretch my capacity for success, for clients, for money, right? Like they're kind of like two equal pieces here. If you think about these as we're going to use a visual here. If we think about these as spheres, your sphere, and let's say the amount of disappointment, I keep messing these words up too, but your ability to sit in and tolerate disappointment, let's say that's a sphere, and let's say the sphere is this big. Well, that is also the same size sphere you have to tolerate success. So the larger your sphere to tolerate disappointment, the larger your sphere to sit in and tolerate success, because both of them are uncomfortable feelings that are outside of your current comfort zone, right? This is our comfort zone, right? These spheres are outside your comfort zone. Disappointment and success, both uncomfortable feelings. I know it doesn't seem like success would be, but that is outside a larger amount of success, a larger amount of money, holding more clients, having more visibility, right? Making more money, charging more. That is all outside of what is currently your experience. That is outside your current comfort zone, right? So your ability to stretch outside your comfort zone, to sit in the discomfort for disappointment, is equal to your ability to stretch your discomfort for success. Is this tracking and making sense? Laura says, hey, happy to be here having lunch with you. Oh, yay, I love that I get to have lunch with you. So I want us to think about it this way, because I think our brains think it's the opposite, right? The less I'm willing to tolerate disappointment, the less I'm available for that, the less I think about that, the more I'm only available for success, the more success I will create. But we can see if these spheres, it's sort of like as soon as you start lowering one sphere, making one sphere smaller, you're making the other sphere smaller. decreasing your tolerance, your capacity for sitting with disappointment or reframing disappointment or even letting go of disappointment is decreasing your capacity for success. And I promise you this, if you look across anyone, like any industry, whether we look at the entertainment industry, the sports industry, we look at our online space, you look at someone in the corporate space, anyone who has massive amounts of success that they are able to tolerate and sit and sustain, I promise you, they also have massive amounts of ability and tolerance for disappointment, and their expanded success is equal to the amount of expanded disappointment they've been willing to run at or sit at. And I think that's just hard for our brain to compute, because I think sometimes what happens is our brain thinks that success, more money, more clients, bigger business, right? Whatever success means to you. For some of you, it might be working less hours, right? Spending more time with your kids. But whatever success is for you, I think our brain thinks that is the this is what takes away all of the discomfort in your life, right? We see success as something to run away to. And I think that is what limits a lot of people in business, because success is an escape. And what I want to offer for you is that success is not an escape. It's not that success isn't beautiful and wonderful. Making lots of money isn't amazing, but you don't get to escape the discomfort and the fears and the things going on with you. It's more when you learn how to tolerate and stretch your capacity to sit in all of those uncomfortable things and to move through them and to rearrange them. That's when you also stretch your capacity for success. But success is equally as uncomfortable, and it is not an escape. It is not a destination, right? It is an expansion of your comfort zone. I'm hoping this is tracking for you all. Laura, you'll have to let me know. I know you're eating lunch, but you'll have to let me know if this is making sense. Okay, so let's talk a little bit first about what happens when we have zero tolerance for discomfort. Not discomfort, disappointment. The two words are like in my brain because there is discomfort with disappointment. We're talking about disappointment today. Let's talk about what that looks like. Let's give some examples. Let's talk about what happens with that, and then I want to chat a little bit more about both how this benefits you as you expand your capacity for disappointment, but also some tools you can use to navigate that discomfort, because you also don't have to have it be a horrible experience when you get disappointed. I get disappointed all of the time, but I think because my tolerance has stretched so much around it, it's like a blip on my radar, right? It's not a huge thing. But what's interesting is if we think about how that is equally, like the proportion of my ability to tolerate disappointment is equal to my ability to hold success, right? In some ways, it's also, not that I'm not grateful for my success or my business or the money or the clients in my business, but I would say equally, it's like not as uncomfortable or big a deal to book a client or to have a big month or to, right? Like these are both just two things that I have stretched my capacity around that just feel pretty normal. And so both kind of like just blip and like, oh, this was disappointing. Oh, this was great. We just made a bunch of money, right? Like, and I don't mean that in an ungrateful way, but just in this, like they're both just a little bit more regulated. But what I see is when we are afraid of being disappointed, or when we have this narrative that when I'm disappointed, this now means something about me, my ability, my capacity, my potential, what happens is we really set ourselves up for sabotage. Now, I want to invite everyone now on the replay to think about what is the story for you? When you think about a disappointment, whether a disappointment is that client you wanted to book said no, or that launch goal you had, you didn't reach it, or the proposal you put out, there was a no to that, right? A lot of times disappointment comes from some sort of rejection or no. Maybe it's an expectation that isn't met. Maybe it's you're disappointed by a client or a team member, or it could be outside of business, right? Someone in your life. I want to invite you to check in with, what do you make that disappointment mean? And check in with, do you make that disappointment mean anything about you? Now, you might not, in which case that's great. There's not as much work to do there. I know for me, just using myself as an example, because I said like this is the work for every business owner I know, and on some level, I know a lot of the work for me was not making disappointment mean something negative about me and something that I was doing wrong, right? Just starting to see these are just normal occurrences in business. And I've just had to do work around that at every level. So I would check in with those two things. What are you making disappointment mean? Are you making disappointment mean this like huge negative catastrophic thing, or you're never going to be successful, or this isn't working, or you suck, or like your business sucks, or you're not cut out to be a business owner, right? What are you making it mean? And are you making it mean anything specifically about you? Those are going to give you two really great insights into some of the work and what you're going to want to rearrange for yourself. But what I see happen is, let's say we're disappointed your launch didn't go the way you wanted to. You didn't hit the numbers you wanted. You didn't get the sales you wanted, right? This is when self-sabotage can very easily set in, because what happens then when we're disappointed and we're making this mean, I'm not cut out to be a business owner, I suck, people didn't like my program, right? We start creating all of these stories that have you bypass neutrally, like a CEO, looking at your business to assess what actually happened, and A, to see what went well, and B, to see what opportunities for growth there are. Right? This is when people stop taking action. This is when people stop showing up. This is when maybe people start people pleasing, or they start like slashing their prices, or they start making weird new offers, or they make themselves wrong, or they stop putting out content, or they decide that program sucked and they create a whole new program, or they hop into another social media platform, right? This is when we get into avoidance patterns, or freezing, right? This is a fear response, stalling patterns. This is when I see people stop and start. But what I see happen is, this is when self-sabotage occurs. And I want you to start to notice this, because your brain is not like, hey, you're self-sabotaging. Your brain has decided this is very logical, right? You had a launch goal of, let's just making this up, 10 people into your program, and you ran your launch and you booked 2 people and you didn't hit your goals, you're disappointed, and that means this didn't work, and that means this is a bad program, so you should obviously not do it again. You should obviously stop. You should obviously take a break. You should obviously take a sabbatical. You're burned out. You should obviously get a different strategy, right? To your brain, this feels very, very logical, and we have to remember our brains are beautiful computers. They're so brilliant, but they like need updates all of the time. Like, a lot of us are running on some outdated as fuck programming software. It's like, remember, did anybody grow up with like the old school Macs where you played what's it called? Oregon Trail, right? It's like some of us are still operating on whatever that software was, instead of like to whatever the current, I probably need to update my computer. I don't even know what it is, like Big Sur, whatever the current operating software is. And yet we just think, oh, what my brain tells me is absolute truth, because this is what the operating software is spitting out, right? Like it's sort of like when you use ChatGPT, if you don't fact check, you're just like, oh, ChatGPT knows everything. And then sometimes you fact check things and you're like, oh, ChatGPT does not know everything. This is some like real backwards fucked up data, right? Same thing here. We have to be so mindful with what we allow ourselves to listen to. This is what mindset work is really about, right? This is what managing your mind is really about. It's not, I'm all for affirmations, but it's not just like, I'm a millionaire. You become a millionaire, and you get to believe that, or it's easier to believe that when you start to learn how to pay attention to your thoughts, how to notice what stories you're ascribing to situations, and how you manage your thoughts around that, and then what you choose to do with your thoughts. That is actually the mindset work. And so what I want us to notice here is, check in with what are your patterns when you're disappointed, because what I see for most people is, and this is why this is a conversation I'm having with clients all the time, and I think my job as a coach, I think in some ways I'm more valuable as a coach. I mean, I'm valuable always to my clients, but when my clients are disappointed, because a couple things are true. One, I'm not triggered by their disappointment because I've done the work around this so much. I have so much tolerance to or capacity to sit with another human and their disappointment, and to not take it on myself. But also, I just see it in such a different frame and a different light, right? I can have empathy for someone and their feels and allow space for that. But I also think, because I just so can have a different perspective and a different understanding of what's going on in their business, I think this is sometimes when I can be so valuable to a client, because I can help them shift out of what they're making that mean, and help them see that's not true, because there's zero part of me that's going to buy into that story or think that's true, because I've just so far removed myself from that story, right? It's just not something that's going to activate me or have me be like, oh yeah, like this is something to worry about. But I also can see the opportunity for every business owner in disappointment, because when I see someone have a launch, right, and their goal is 10 people and they've booked 2 people into that, I don't think, oh, they suck as a business owner, oh my gosh, their strategy sucks, or oh my gosh, they should definitely quit, or they should definitely stop, right? I see this as like, what a fucking win. Like, this is great. Like, let's look at all the things that went well, but also my job as a coach is we didn't hit those goals, so let's also if we can get out of all the spin of the disappointment, because when we're in the spin of the disappointment, what you are doing is bypassing being able to show up as a CEO to look at your business and see what your business is trying to tell you. It's the same if you're disappointed in a relationship and you're just like so wrapped up in your story, it has you bypass being able to show up in that relationship to address whatever the issue is, or to have that conversation, or to see what the relationship is telling you, right? If I can support a client to get out of their spin around the disappointment, then I can also help them to look at, great, so let's also figure out what happened, because you didn't reach your goal. And that's not a bad thing, right? There's all this good that happened. You ran a launch, right? You created assets. You did get 2 people in. Like, what a win is that? You're probably, this is the irony with disappointment. Most of you, when you get disappointed, you're disappointed because you have unmet expectations, right? But if you actually take a look at your current day reality, you are either in the same place or further ahead than you were previously, and yet you're wrapped around the story that you suck, or you're disappointed that this is bad, simply because of an unmet expectation, right? Is that tracking? So, we can process through that, but when we can get back to neutral, we can actually take a look at what went well here, right? What are all the things to celebrate, but also, what are all the things for us to improve? Your business is telling you something. And if you didn't reach those goals, is it, this is not a conversation about launches. Maybe we'll do one of those coming up, because I have a lot to say on breaking that down. But right, this then has you show up as a CEO, and this is how you then go from $800 a month to multi-5-figure months, or to having that 100K launch. It's not by saying, I can't handle disappointment, this sucks, let me start all over again with something different. It's, I can handle this disappointment. I can see maybe it wasn't as bad as I think it is. I can get back to neutral, not make this mean I suck. And I can just look at what am I learning here? What is the information? What is the data telling me? Why did this happen? What do I need to do to be able to get that result I want? Or do I need to change my expectation? Is this making sense? Laura says, yes, totally making sense. I missed the first few minutes, but I'm still tracking. We are talking about disappointment and how avoiding disappointment is essentially, I think, one of the biggest reasons people stay stuck or sabotage their business. Now, with what we're talking about here, I think maybe what's helpful to also notice, because I started to touch on this, is noticing how often disappointment comes because of unmet expectations. And so yes, both here, I think there's 2 things that are true. I think one thing to remember is that if you're disappointed because of unmet expectations, in some ways this is such a construct of the mind, in that if you can hold your expectation lightly, right? If you can be detached from your expectation, then there's actually nothing to be disappointed about, because my guess is you're in the same place or a little bit further ahead. And it's really about the expectation itself, not about the reality of the circumstances or your results. But I think the other thing, and this is where I see a lot of business owners also have fear of disappointment, really sabotage their business. So we talked about when you get disappointed, how this can, if we don't know how to tolerate that, how that can sabotage your business. But there's also a fear of disappointment. And I see this in so many clients of mine. They're so scared of potentially being disappointed that they don't pick big goals, that they don't want to put themselves out there, that they don't want to be rejected, that they don't want to even set high expectations or high standards. Expectations kind of a funny word here, but right, it's almost like they don't want to pick those stretch goals for themselves because they are so scared of being disappointed. There's so much perfectionism getting kicked up around what that would mean and how they wouldn't be able to handle that instead they end up shrinking back and playing small as a way to self-protect. And I talk about this so often, but I think we just want to look at this by what this is. That all makes sense, right? These are self-protective mechanisms that your brain builds in. It's like, oh, it would suck to be disappointed, right? You would be disappointed if you make a really big goal and you go after it and you don't get it. So therefore, the way to stay safe is to not have a really big goal, not to go after it, right? Not to make big moves, not to make a big investment, not to get support, not to put yourself out there, not to launch the new program, not to start the new podcast, whatever that is, right? Because then you won't be disappointed. You are then safe by default. So we can see why the brain does this, but what this means is you're then operating your business from a place of fear, and you are choosing self-defense or self-protective mechanisms as opposed to you're choosing avoidance tactics, avoidance strategies, instead of strategies that move you towards what you want. So this is all a way to avoid avoid feeling things you don't want to feel, right? You will avoid that disappointment. I mean, you'll be disappointed by default in many ways because you also won't put yourself out there to get those results. But right, this is a great way to avoid feeling the feelings you don't want to feel. But if you've got avoidance strategies, that also means you're going to avoid the results you want. And all of this conversation here, and what I really want everyone to walk away with, is starting to think about what are all of the ways I'm limiting my success because I'm trying to avoid feeling disappointment or feeling anything. And what would it look like if instead I looked at moving towards strategies? What would it look like to move towards the goals I want? What would it look like to move towards the money I want to make? What would it look like to move towards those bigger, stretchier goals? What would it look like to also move towards being okay with being disappointed? Not that we're saying we have a goal to be disappointed, but to remember that your capacity for sitting in or having disappointment or having rejection, right, is equal, like is proportionally equal to your ability to hold success, to create success. Just seeing if, yeah, okay, cool, there's no questions. I'm just seeing a sip of water. I'm just seeing if there's anything else on that I wanted to say before because I make all these notes and then I don't look at them. This was the other thing I wanted to say, and then I'll talk a little bit about how just some of the ways to sit with, to handle disappointment, because it also doesn't mean you have to sit around feeling horrible all the time. Again, I have disappointments happen all the time, and it's not like I'm one of the most feeling emotional human people I know, but I think I've just so done the work around this that they just really are something that I can just move through relatively easily, that don't kick up a lot for me. But it's just because I've learned to make friends with them, to reframe them. So we'll talk about that. But the last thing I wanted to highlight here is the false logic the brain likes to kick up, and how upper limiting, that's the term from Gay Hendricks from The Big Leap, where he talks about we all have a capacity for how much joy and success and love and abundance that we will allow ourselves to have because we hit a threshold, right? We have a comfort zone essentially for how much of all of the good stuff we can tolerate. And when we hit that upper limit of all of that good stuff, right, we get outside our comfort zone essentially, and he calls it upper limiting. We will hit that upper limit and we will do something to self-sabotage to bring ourselves back to homeostasis, right? We are, as humans, we are wired to want to be in homeostasis. Homeostasis meaning like pretty stable, like this is what we're used to, this is our comfort zone. And so I think what we have to be mindful with disappointment is knowing that upper limiting is a very real thing. And this is why I keep saying your ability to tolerate disappointment is equal to your ability to tolerate success. Yes, success is something to tolerate. I really do believe that because of what we're talking about here with upper limiting, right? You have a set point, and anything outside of that set point is going to feel dysregulating to your nervous system, even if it's really positive. We talked about this, I think, in our masterclass last week. When I think about excitement, when I think about any of the big emotions, they're all dysregulating in some ways, right? Like to our nervous system. I think we have to remember that. And so what I see sometimes happen is, yes, you can be scared of disappointment and have that then have you be in avoidance tactics or operate from fear. So it's like, how do I avoid feeling disappointment? But what I've also seen clients do is create a big amount of success where there isn't disappointment. Right? But they are outside their comfort zone. They've hit that upper limit, and how finding problems that don't exist or how finding things to be disappointed about becomes their form of self-sabotage because it is very uncomfortable for them at that level of success, and then how latching onto that becomes the reason they decide they don't want to keep the thing they're doing. And I'm going to try to give an example here because I think this maybe sounds a little obtuse, but so let's say you have a group program and you blow your launch out of the water. I've seen this happen before, right? It's epic, and you just make all the, like, it's like everything you've wanted to create, but it's like double the amount of money you've made, double the amount of people you've served. It's like all of your wishes and dreams in business have come true, and your nervous system is like, oh, this is uncomfortable, and you just hit that upper limit. I have seen clients then, right, where it's like the disappointment kicks up in a different way, where it's like, well, they're disappointed because they thought that it was going to feel different. They're disappointed because they thought the people in the program were going to be different. They're disappointed because people aren't getting the results they wanted. They're disappointed because they actually have to show up to do the work, right? They find something to get disappointed by. And because there's no normalcy or toleration for the disappointment, right? Like that disappointment becomes this essentially form of self-sabotage, this really big thing that they make themselves wrong. All the things we were talking about before, they make themselves wrong, they make the program wrong, right? They make it this, it's essentially self-sabotage, right? It is a way to upper limit. And what it's doing is it's both having them basically avoid stretching their tolerance for success and to enjoy the good stuff, right? There's like all this good over here, but they're like, let me focus on these things I can be disappointed in because I haven't created tolerance around disappointment. This then automatically yucks my yum, right? It squashes the joy, which all of our brains are like, why would anybody do that? But we have to just keep coming back to our brains are not logical. Our brains are designed to keep you safe and to keep you comfortable and to do the things that are familiar and to do the things that seem like, well, this is what it's always been like and this is how you've stayed alive, right? So with massive amounts of success and joy and money and all of these good things, if that feels dysregulating, if that feels scary, if that feels, like, oh, like a little bit too much for your system to tolerate, and I will say these things, like, I'm not even into this. Like, this is something I definitely have to catch myself around. I was just talking about this with my husband after coming back from a wonderful trip. And I was like, I was just having to watch my mind on the plane really be mindful, like really do the work around this to not want to start to poke holes and just like find things I'm disappointed with or find things that are wrong as a way to sabotage just all the things that were going well. I booked clients while I was away with basically like the easiest I ever had. We just had a good month. I had a great trip. Like all of these good things were happening. It was just fascinating to watch my own brain. Again, the difference is I'm just more practiced at noticing how wild my brain wants to be and not listening to it. Anyway, so seeing it here, I bring this up here because I want you to see how it really is false logic and that our brains are full of false logic and full of lies. And this is just another way I see when we don't understand disappointment and have a relationship with it, how we will use that to upper limit and to bring ourselves back down. Just using it's just like such an easy example with travel. Like it really was just, it couldn't have been a more lovely weekend. I saw my best friends. I made money while I was gone, like all of the good things that could happen. My husband had good things happen, right? Like, so it's like stretching past your upper limit. And on the plane back, I was like, I had to wait in line, and I'm trying to think of like what were some of the things my brain wanted to kick up. I was just like finding like little things about like the hotel, like the air, like little things to be a brat about, and not me a brat, but my brain was just wanting to find these things. Like I was disappointed that I spent all this money on the hotel and that it was X, Y, and Z, or that that my flight got delayed, or that and I just had to notice that where I was like, oh, this is so fascinating. Everything is so good right now, and I'm so happy. And I'm so content, and my brain just wants to find literally, like if we zoom out, like the dumbest shit in the world to be disappointed about. And so I can catch it and stop it and rearrange it. But I'm bringing that here because this is what just happens if you're not aware of it over and over again. And so either we avoid feeling disappointed and then we avoid success, or we create success and we use disappointment as a way to sabotage ourselves and to sabotage the enjoyment. But we can also see how, like, it would have been so easy if I had just like fed those stories. I'm sure I could have found 25 more things to be disappointed, right? I probably could have found a reason. Both my friends I saw, one's pregnant and one, we went to go visit my friend with her 2 babies, right? So that's a very different girls trip than maybe we would have had 10 years ago, right? I could have found reasons that are not real at all, but like why I was disappointed in what we did, right? And that could have caused a friction in our relationship or our friendship. I could have used that disappointment to be mad at my husband and caused a fight, right? Like there's so many things I could have created there that literally are not real. And this is where we want to be so mindful, because your brain wants to find a problem and it wants something to fix. And when things are good, it wants to bring you down, not because it's mean, but because it's trying to keep you comfortable and safe and in the familiar. Okay, I'm off on a little tangent there, but I hope you can understand that, because this, I think with disappointment, we sometimes think that it's more the fear of disappointment or what happens when I am disappointed, instead of how our brain will also use disappointment as self-sabotage. Okay, so let's talk about how to handle disappointment like a pro and how to navigate this. So a couple of things here. I think the first thing that I find really helpful with disappointment is to notice it is simply a thought and a feeling, and that's it. And in that way of the less you try to avoid it, the less you try to fix it, the less you try to understand it, the less you try to solve it, the more you can just see it as like, oh, your brain doing its brain thing. Oh, you're having a sensation in your body. The easier it is just to notice it, sit with it, and let it go. When I was at the airport and my brain was just like wanting to have a little temper tantrum, I was just really quickly, it's sort of like when you meditate and you just start to practice labeling your thoughts, and then you can just watch them go. Or I think this is from David Hawkins. I think he talks about this in Letting Go, how most emotions have like a 10-minute shelf life. And if you just allow yourself to feel them and sit in them, they'll pass pretty quickly. It's just most of us want to, when we have a thought float by, we want to wrestle with it, right? Our brain loves to fight for our limitations. So instead of noticing a thought and labeling it like, oh, this is silly, my brain's doing its brain thing, I'm disappointed, or oh, I'm noticing I'm just having the sensation of disappointment in my body, let me just sit with this for 5 minutes, and just letting it pass, we notice the thought of disappointment and we just want to latch onto it and create a story and another story and argue for it and fight for it and then figure it out and solve, right? And as soon as we're doing that, we are just creating all of this momentum around that disappointment, right? We're giving it arms and legs and like we're turning it into this whole thing. I always think about the example of if you've ever found or seen two people who are in two different, someone who's Republican and someone who's Democratic, have a conversation about an issue. All they do is fight for their own point of view. And no one ever convinces the other person of anything, right? Like all they do is each person convinces themselves more and more of their own point of view, because that's what we do when we just latch onto something and we keep talking, like, right? We just convince ourselves we're right more and more. And of course, politically, I think I'm correct. Like that's just also the nature of it. But we're not open when we do that to hearing another person's viewpoint or to having our mind change or to seeing something different, because we just want to fight for whatever that belief is. That's a little bit of what happens with disappointment or any other belief, right? When it goes by, we just want to fight for it. We just basically want to be that in that political party fight where we're just like fighting, like giving all the evidence for it, and we make it so real, as opposed to if you can start to notice, oh, this is just something my brain does. Like this is just like when you have a pain in your leg, if you're like, oh, my leg's sore, like this is a thing, like I went for a run yesterday, my leg's sore, as opposed to like creating all this meaning around it. Well, that means I suck at running, and that means I'm a horrible person, that means I should stop running, and that's a horrible sport, and, right? If we can just start to see disappointment in that way, or same when you're having that sensation in your body, like, oh, I'm noticing this in my chest, I'm noticing that my heart's racing a little bit, I'm noticing it's in my stomach, right? Like I'm having this sensation, this feeling. Maybe give it a shape, give it a color, sit with it for a couple of minutes. It is fascinating how just noticing that will allow so much to dissipate. This is maybe not the topic to bring up here, but it just feels so relevant. Yesterday was the anniversary of losing my dad 4 years ago. And of course, I miss my dad terribly. And I had I had the best dad in the world, y'all. And I think one of the things that has made grieving and moving through this easier with me is I've just so allowed myself to sit with my feelings. And so yesterday I was sad, and instead of like I shouldn't be sad or I should be like all of the things or trying to dissect that, I just cried, and I cried for 15 minutes, right? And then I was good, and not good in that like I'll never miss my dad again, but good in that I just got it out. I just felt my feelings, right? I didn't try to analyze them. I didn't try to fix them. I didn't try to stifle them. I didn't try to be like, oh my gosh, I should be stronger than this, or it's been 4 years, why are you crying, or you shouldn't feel this way, or you should feel this way, right? I just let myself feel the feelings, and then I was okay, and then I could go move on with my day. So disappointment, like these feelings are very similar. What happens when we don't allow ourselves to feel, and I mean this sincerely, like it was the middle of a work day. It's not like it was convenient for me to feel those feelings then, but I literally closed my computer. I was like, I'm just gonna let myself feel this for a little bit. It's the same with this. And I think if you can start to get into a practice, what we tend to do is when there's an uncomfortable emotion or feeling, right, we either so want to avoid it and like push it down and shove it aside, or we so want to indulge it, as opposed to how can we just be with it and feel it, right? Either extremes don't really support it, right? I also didn't like try to indulge indulge the cry and like make it bigger and like try to like get myself worked up or think I had to cry. Like I just was feeling the feelings. I let myself feel them. I'm hoping this is making sense for y'all. But I think when you do this, a couple of things happen. One, you stretch your tolerance for sitting in disappointment. I think you also start to see disappointment can't hurt you. You start to see, oh, it's simply a thought or it's simply a feeling. I can tolerate both, right? I think if I use the grief, for example, I'm not scared of grief. It's not like it's my favorite emotion, but it is, I don't know, it would also be so weird if I didn't cry or if I didn't have grief, right? Like I also don't not want to have that emotion. That is part of, it's a beautiful thing. It's part of being a feeling human being. And so I think if we can see disappointment that way too, where it's not something to be avoided, it's also not something you have to be scared of. When you can see it's a thought that you can say like, oh, my brain's just doing that thing, how cute, or oh, this is a feeling I can tolerate that will pass when I allow it to in maybe 10 minutes, right? You stop being so scared of it. That's how you stretch your capacity to sit in it. But this is also how we then stop trying to avoid it and stop doing that thing where you don't pick big goals or you don't run after things in your business or you don't put yourself out there or you don't double down on something you've just been disappointed by, because you now see, oh, like not in this way where it's like, oh, like I'm impenetrable, like nothing affects me, but more in this way of, oh, I allow things to affect me and I can be affected and still see like it's fine. Okay, so like that didn't feel good for 10 minutes. Okay, so I cried for 15 minutes. Like, and I'm okay, and I can handle this, and then I can continue on, right? It's when we think we can't handle it and we try to push it away or we overindulge it, that's when it becomes so intolerable. And so I have really just seen through my clients, this is what I coach them around so much, and through myself, the more you can see, okay, so if I run at this thing and I get disappointed, so what? So I'm going to be unhappy for 10 minutes. So I'm going to maybe cry. So I'm going to have some thoughts that I'm going to have to rearrange. Like, I think I can handle that. Like, I think I could just, like, it's not just a feeling to diminish it, but it's also just a feeling, right? Like if I look at grief, not that I'm diminishing what the experience is, but in many ways it's like, oh, well, but I can handle, like, it actually felt very cathartic to cry. It actually felt really good to remember my dad. Like, I can handle that, right? It feels so much less scary in that way and so much less something to avoid. And I think in that way, like, that's when you become unstoppable. Thank you for the hearts, Laura. I appreciate that. So I really think there's this way sometimes, and they're bringing this back to the conversation on my friend's podcast, where I think we think mindset work means we're going to get rid of the work is to get rid of the experience and the thought and like never have it and just to like always believe you're a millionaire. And not that there isn't part of that where it's like belief isn't important. Obviously it is. But I think this is more when I think of mindset work, right? When I think of what's the work that took me from $800 per month to 25 to 30K to 40K months, when I think of what takes my client from, I was talking about this on my friend's podcast, from coming in and maybe making $1,000 to quickly replacing their corporate income within 3 months and being on track for $1 million in a couple of years. Like, it's this kind of work. It's just, this is just not as sexy. It's so much sexier for me to tell you, I can tell you how to erase a block that you're never going to have again, because that's what our brain wants, right? Our brain wants to avoid things. Our brain wants to like be a non-human thing, as opposed to, actually, I can teach you, or you can learn how to make friends with your thoughts and your emotions and see that you can tolerate them. And when you can do that, and you can see, oh, I can handle this and I don't have to avoid it. The irony here is you're less likely to have that big emotion, that big feeling, to have all of these stories, because what you resist persists, right? The more we push something away, the more we resist something, the bigger it gets. I'm sure I've used this example in this group 8,000 times. I'm going to use it again. If we think about the Chinese finger trap, you know, that little toy that you put your fingers in, you like, your goal is to like get your fingers out. If you put your finger in that toy, like, what's the way you get your fingers out? You just have to sit there, right? And not struggle with it, and you can get your fingers out, right? If you struggle with it, what you resist persists, right? Like, that's when it latches on and gets really tight. The other example I always use is what happens if you have a beach ball and you're in the pool and you try to shove it underwater, right? The more force you try to shove it underwater with, the more like equal opposite reaction. This is physics, this is science, right? That it's going to pop back and hit you in the face. Versus if you have a beach ball and you just let it chill, it just floats on the water. It's really the same things with our thoughts and our emotions. It's just, what do most of us try to do? And I think what is sometimes the not most helpful teachings like the Manic Manifesting teach us. It's like struggle with the thoughts and the emotions, push them down, make sure they never come back, as opposed to like, actually, what if it's like you could just tolerate, like you could just handle it if you got disappointed. Like, I dare you to pick a goal so stretchy in your business, and obviously not one that has you like get in your head or not be in belief. I think that's a whole different conversation. I don't think that is actually helpful, or that has you get into burnout patterns. That's not what I'm talking about. But I dare you to go after what you want. Maybe that's a better way to say it. Knowing that like you could be disappointed, and to know that you could handle it. But in that process, you're still going to grow. You're still going to expand. You're going to expand your capacity for success. And I promise you, you will be further along. You will create more success than if you try to figure out how to do it without really allowing yourself to want what you want, and without being available for that disappointment. Okay, some other tools here, because maybe that doesn't land as much for some of you. I have one or two more here. What I find can also be helpful, I'm just seeing, no questions. What I find can also be helpful with disappointment, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning of the conversation, but is really starting to see how can you reframe disappointment. So in two ways. So I think we can always check with disappointment. Am I actually disappointed, or is so much stuff going well that I'm trying to find the trade-offs, or like the one imperfect part of an imperfectly perfect situation because I'm upper limiting? That's not quite reframing, but I think that's always something to check in with. If I use my trip example, right? I had to just be like, you're being ridiculous, Kim. Brain, I love you so much. You're just being such a 3-year-old child right now, because it just feels so uncomfortable that everything is so good that you just are like fighting. So like you're also fighting like the dumbest shit. Like this is all you got, brain. But right, like I think just have a little fun with it in that way. Don't make yourself wrong. But I do think it can bring some levity to almost be like, oh, that's so cute. Like you are so adorable, brain. Like you're just so like, oh, you poor little baby. Like and not in a way of being mean to yourself. If that kicks up any way where you're actually being mean to yourself, don't do it. But I personally find that can bring a lot of levity and just create a lot of separation, where I see I am not my thoughts, right? This is a part of me, whether it's my inner child or my younger self or my inner brat or my inner saboteur, whatever we want to call it. I can then just create a little bit of that separation, as opposed to I am my thoughts are my truth. And I find it very helpful. I like to frame it as I'm giving my power away then to these thoughts, and I always want to take my power back. So I find that very helpful when I'm upper limiting. If that's helpful for anyone else to take on, right? If I notice I'm upper limiting, I'm like, oh, I'm giving my thought, like all of my power away to disappointment and to these like honestly quite silly thoughts. Let me take my power back around this. And what I also find can be very helpful, so that's if you're upper limiting. If it's more, you're actually sitting in disappointment, right? You had the launch and you've played full out and you didn't hit the numbers you wanted to. I really think it can be helpful. Yes, feel your feels. Yes, like you get to be disappointed. And I think it can also be very helpful to look at, but what went well, right? If we remember that a lot of what's happening here is it's simply unmet expectation, right? But if you if the goal had been see your launch out to the end, or if you had a different goal of all I got to do is bring in 2 people, right? You would feel very differently. I have a great example of this. I have a client who just had a first-time launch, and she booked 27 people into a first-time program without having a conversion event. And I keep saying I shouldn't say that, because then everyone's going to think they don't need a conversion event for their launches. But I think what she did such a great job with is her expectation was 3. I think she wanted to book 3 people in, and then she changed it to 5 people into her program. And it's like, I could do that. That would be enough to run this. I will be so excited. And so, but she also played full out for that launch, where she was so available for more, but she just wasn't going to make herself wrong. Like she was like, my goal is to see this launch out, to have fun doing it, to get all the assets done, like to give this my all. I'm available for like more and more people, but like I'm like, that's what's going to be happy for me or be great for me. And so she booked 27 people, and I think part of the reason is because she didn't put all this pressure on herself. But I think it's really interesting here to see she could have had a goal of 30 people, or she could have had a goal of 40 people in that first round and been disappointed by that. And it's really just what was the expectation. And like whether you're disappointed or not, I have another client who had a launch recently and she did a really great job, but she's disappointed in it because her expectations just weren't met. And so I think that is where it can be really helpful if you're feeling disappointed to check in with yourself and to see, like, is this simply like, what if my expectations have been something different? What if my goal had been something different? And how can I reframe this? How can I actually look back and see either how amazing I did or what went well, or like what things, like all the ways I did grow? Because we're often disappointed because we just have this arbitrary like in some ways these are just like these, I'm going to make $1 million this year, which like of course we want to believe in, but then if you don't and you make 750K, right, you're disappointed, as opposed, even if last year you made 350, right? And it's like, in many ways this is just something we do to ourselves, which we could just say is also more upper limiting. So I would invite you, if this is what's going on for you, to see how can you actually look at, instead of what you're disappointed at, look at what have you done well. And this isn't to bypass or to ignore your opportunities for growth, but I think it's really hard to notice your opportunities for growth. I actually think disappointment is a way to avoid that and to bypass that, right? Because then you're just so wrapped up in indulging this thought and this emotion that's very limiting, as opposed to being able to get to neutral to see what are the growth opportunities. And so I think the biggest win here then for you is to look at, what did I do well? How can I give myself credit? How can I see, if it's the launch example, that I played full out, or that I created all of these assets, or that I booked 3 people and before I had no program at all, right? Like, what are the things I can give myself so much credit for and celebrate, and to see what I'm disappointed by is actually a really big win. And I would say then from here, this is like a different thing, but then if you didn't meet your goals, I think the win is always after you can see what you've done right and gotten yourself back to neutral, then I would see this as like, what a great opportunity, because whatever you've just done has given you information. And I think this is, again, how we can start to just reframe disappointment. If instead of disappointment, we see, oh, this is an opportunity for me to learn and grow, that's such a win. I think I shared this on our masterclass last week. I'm playing around with Reels for the first time, like ever, and on Instagram. And when I have a reel that doesn't perform that well, I'm not disappointed. I'm like, I mean, I could be, but I'm not. Instead, I just see that as such an opportunity. I'm like, well, this is great information. This is great data. Why is this one not performing as well as this one, right? Like, what can I learn from this? I think this is when my job as a coach is extra valuable, because I can hold people in the disappointment, but also then we get back to neutral. One of my clients who was disappointed by her launch, right? After we worked through the disappointment, I was like, great, well, let's also look at what happened. I think it's only disappointing if we don't walk away with information, with data, with understanding why you got the results you got. That to me is actually disappointing, right? What I think is a win is if you go through something and we can then understand what happened and what we want to adjust or do or improve upon. That to me is always a win, right? It is. I really truly believe this. It is only a disappointment if I just don't understand why, or we don't have the data or information to figure out why, or if it's disappointment by default because you just threw in the towel. And even then, there's still information in that, right? If you just threw in the towel and quit halfway through, to me, that means there's probably something mindset going on, right? Like, that's still information for us. That's still data for us to look at. That's still something where we understand, oh, we know why you got those results. You got those results because you stopped showing up. You got those results, or lack of results, because you didn't believe in yourself, or because you freaked out, or because you pulled back. That's such great information, because now we know the work to focus on together to get you those bigger results next time. And so I think both things here, when you can see, wait a second, disappointment is just a thought, it's just a feeling, I can handle this, and here's how I can handle it, right? I can hold it a little more lightly. But also, disappointment is also just information. Like, when I can reframe this and see what's the win in this, right? It's just an unmet expectation. What's the win in this? But also, what's the information in this? Can I understand why, how this happened? If I can walk away with that information as a business owner, I have just won, right? Every business ever in this world is going to have disappointment, not meet expectations. But the businesses that are around 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years later, the difference is, instead of being like, well, that sucked, I suck, let's go close up shop, right? They're looking at this neutrally, and they're like, what's the information from this? What do we do with this information? How do we use this to be the setup to our next win? Most big wins, most big launches, most big successes are built upon lots of disappointments and the data, the information, the gold that is mined from those. So I think that is, again, not that we're like wanting disappointment, but I think it's just a way for your brain to see it as a normal part of business and to get so much good out of it. So much good stuff here. Thanks, Kim, says Laura. Yes, the fear of disappointment is often worse than the actual disappointment itself. I mean, it really is, Laura, and I'm sure you see this in your clients as well. It's just fascinating to me how the fear of disappointment, not only is it worse, but it is the thing that actually creates the disappointment, right? When we're like, we then just create disappointment by default, which I just think is like, our brains are so illogical. I'm scared I'm going to get rejected, so I'm not going to put myself out there. So then by default, I will get rejected and not get the result I want. Like, it's just our brains are so funny. Laura says, love this reframe of disappointment as data info. Yeah. It's sort of like, disappointment and rejection, I think, are in similar ballparks. And I think in that way too, I think rejection can also, I see it as a catalyst to success, and being willing to run at rejection is what opens you up to more success. But there's also often so much data and information for us in rejection as well, if we're willing to look at it. But both disappointment and rejection, we can't mine the gold that is in that and see how it can be the springboard for success. And also how the more we tolerate that, right, the more we open ourselves up for success if we don't create a new relationship with it. And so when we can create a new relationship with disappointment, with rejection, right, we then allow ourselves to get to neutral, to look at what is this beautiful information here? How is this setting me up? And again, I'm not a robot. I know I talked about robot mode in our masterclass last week, and I do have that, but it's not like I'm like, yay, it feels so good when I'm disappointed. I love that feeling, or it feels so good when I'm rejected. But I also just don't make it mean a whole lot. And I think that's the big difference. It's really, what are you making this mean? And then what are you doing with that meaning? And so when I get disappointed, when I get rejected, if I'm not making it mean something negative about me, if I'm not making it mean something negative about my business, if I'm just making it mean, oh, I got rejected, that sucks, or like, oh, this is disappointing, right? If I can just make it mean something more neutral, let myself feel it, let it go, then what I'm doing with it can be so much more potent, right? If what I'm doing with rejection, if what I'm making rejection or disappointment mean all of these negative things to be avoided, right, what I'm going to do with it is a bunch of avoidance tactics, or making myself wrong tactics, or sabotage tactics, as opposed to, if I'm making this mean like, okay, like this sucks, but it's like not that big of a deal, I can let it go. But also there's a lot of really great information here. The Reels examples is so I think helpful because it's just easy and pretty neutral, right? I'm like, oh, this reel tanked, interesting, like what happened here? Then I can see, right, then I can learn from it and get exactly what I need to know to springboard forward. Laura says, haha, yes, so true. All right, y'all. I know this is not the most sexy topic in the world, but it's the real stuff, right? This is the real work. And I really do find, I was saying this to a client the other day. I'm trying to remember who I was saying this to, but I really do see so often as a coach, right, that why I'm so valuable to my clients is not because of the sexy stuff. It's because of the unsexy stuff like this. And just, I think I have just done the work myself to be so neutral around this, and just to so see this as the work, and to so be able to sit and hold space around this for someone else without taking it on, but also without making it mean something, right? If I don't think it's a big deal, and I'm not getting super jacked up by someone's disappointment in a launch result, right, then I'm also modeling, mirroring, like, then it's also, if you're on the other side, it doesn't have to be as big a deal for you. If I'm stressed out or triggered or freaked out or whatever, right, like that only reinforces that limiting story or what is stressful for you, but it also keeps us from doing the work, right? Like when I can, it's not that I don't care, but when I can, if anything, I care so much for my clients that I'm willing to do the work to be super neutral in that way. But that's also what allows us to then dig in to find the good stuff and to stay in the game long enough to have those really big results. And I think that's one of the reasons my clients get such big results is for that reason. And so I reflect that to all of you, because I think we hear some of this, it's like not the super sexiest, but I want you to see how both like this work, like I've seen it change my business, I've seen it change my clients' businesses, but also for you, I know many of you are coaches, you're service providers. Not that everybody has to hold space around this, but even for those of you who are OBMs or designers, right, your clients are going to be disappointed with maybe you, or with a design you created, or with, if you're an OBM, like you're supporting them with a launch, with their results, right? I think the more that you can even understand this and not take it on yourself, or to see what we're talking about here, where it's like there can be a lot of gold in this, and like it doesn't have to be what are you making it mean, and what are you making it mean about your client, but about yourself and about your work, but also like what's the goals you can mine from this. I think the easier it can make those relationships with your clients as well, right? I'm just using the OBM as an example, because I have a client who's an OBM, and I'm just thinking of conversations we've had and work she's done, right? The more she's seeing, like, it can be okay for her clients to be disappointed, and she can tolerate that. Like, she doesn't have to take that on, and she can tolerate even that disappointment with them and hold that space around it without feeling like she has to fix it, but also seeing, like, what are the opportunities there? That doesn't mean she sucks, right? It's just allowed her to expand her capacity for clients she can hold, for the service, for what she's able to do. And so same for all of you. So I think just seeing like this is something that I think can really serve you on both sides of your business, even though it's not the most sexiest, I think it leads to very sexy results. All right, y'all. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk on disappointment. I had fun with this conversation. I'm also I feel like I'm like extra amped up today without caffeine. I really think it's the sunshine. If you're listening to this and you're like, okay, not the most sexy thing in the world, Kim, but also this is the thing I need support with, and I want the kind of coach who's, yes, going to help me with the strategy, yes, knows how to help me message and market and package and sell and to show up and take more space online and to put myself out there to have those really big launches. Like, I want to be like your client who just booked 27 spots, or I want to make 6 figures or 7 figures in my business. But I also realize that with that comes the ability to run at disappointment and to have the kind of coach who's going to be willing to sit in that with me, and then also to just mine through the disappointment and to see what are the wins there, what are the growth edges there. That is my approach. That's how I work with my clients. I would love to connect with you if this is landing for you. You are my type of person. If this is not landing for you, you should run in the other direction and find someone else. And I mean that with all the love and sincerity in my heart. But I like to do the work that actually matters and actually gets results with my clients. I will drop a discovery call link below. I'm opening up some one-on-one spots over the next couple of months. We also created a brand new intensive that I announced on my masterclass last week called Your Marketing Multiplied. This is more of a week-long intensive where we're going to look more at the marketing side of things. So less the mindset, more your messaging, your positioning, your marketing strategy to really dial that up to help you grow to those consistent 10K, 20K months and create that consistency to bring you to multi-six figures in your business in a way that's really profitable. So if that's more your speed, if you like, I more want to jump in on the strategy side of things, that's a great opportunity. Me and my team are offering $250 off the intensive, or if you want to jump into 6 months with me, the first month of my coaching fees, $250 off if you book by February 10th. I offered this last year for our masterclass. I've offered it now. I've already had quite a few people take me up on it, which is very fun to me because I love getting to like reward people who are fast action takers, but I don't know if I will offer that again. So if you've been on the fence with working with me, this is like the best time ever because that makes the intensive $1,000 for a week of one-on-one support with me, and it includes a content review, which I'm very, very good at. I just helped one of my mastermind sisters with one of her launches with some copy, and she was like, holy shit, my mind is blown. She's like, you are a master at your craft. And I say that just to give you some social proof. And get 2 hours of one-on-one coaching with me. I've been doing this for 8 years. My clients get excellent results. So it is, I will say this with all confidence, I think it is a crazy good deal that I probably won't offer again. So take me up on that if you've been wondering if you want to work with me. Like now is a really good time. So I'll drop links for that. I'll drop information below, and you can book a discovery call. I'll drop a booking link for the intensive if you just want to jump in on that. And then, I'll be back next week with another live stream topic for y'all, and hopefully more sunshine because it's working for me. I love you all so much. Thank you for being here. Bye.